The ancient Greeks understood something fundamental about strength. They knew that the strongest man in the world could still be broken. Not by force, not by combat, but by the thing that lived inside his own mind. Hercules was born Alcaeus in the city of Thebes, sometime in the mythological age when gods still walked among mortals. And the line between divine and human blurred like heat rising from Summerstone. His mother was Alcmene, a mortal woman of extraordinary beauty and virtue. His father was Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, who had disguised himself as Alcmene's husband to seduce her. This made Hercules both blessed and cursed from the moment of his first breath. The blessing was obvious: superhuman strength that manifested in infancy when he strangled 2 serpents sent to kill him in his cradle. The curse was equally clear. He would spend his entire life caught between 2 worlds, never fully belonging to either, and hunted by the jealous rage of Hera, Zeus's wife, who hated all evidence of her husband's infidelity. The name Hercules itself came later, a desperate attempt at appeasement. Originally called Alcaeus, he was renamed Heracles, meaning glory of Hera, in a futile hope that honoring the goddess might soften her hatred. It didn't work. Hera's rage was patient and thorough, the kind that waits years for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came when Hercules had everything to lose. He had married Megara, princess of Thebes, and together they had children. The sources vary on the number. Some say 3, others as many as 8, but the number matters less than what they represented. They were proof that Hercules could be more than his strength, more than his divine parentage. They were his chance at a normal life, at peace, at being simply a man and a father. Hera sent madness, not the wild, obvious kind that announces itself with screaming and violence. The kind that creeps in quietly, that distorts reality so gradually you don't notice the world changing. One evening, as the sun set over Thebes and the cooking fires were lit in homes throughout the city, Hercules looked at his family and saw enemies. He saw threats, his magnificent strength, the gift that had protected so many, turned inward on the people he loved most. When the madness lifted like fog burning off in morning light, Hercules found himself surrounded by the bodies of his wife and children. His hands were red. The home that had held laughter and ordinary happiness was now a tomb. The strongest man in the world stood in the ruins of everything that had made him human and understood. That strength meant nothing, that it was worse than nothing. It was the instrument of his own damnation. He could have killed himself. Many men would have. Instead, he sought purification. He traveled to Delphi, to the oracle of Apollo, desperate for some way to cleanse himself of the pollution of kinslaying, the worst crime imaginable in Greek society. The oracle's answer was not comfort, it was labor. She told him to go to Tiryns and submit himself to his cousin Eurystheus, king of Mycenae, and to perform whatever tasks Eurystheus demanded of him. The number of tasks was set at 10, though it would eventually grow to 12. Only through this servitude could he purify his soul and find some measure of redemption. So Hercules, the son of Zeus, the strongest mortal ever born, became a servant. He traveled to Mycenae, to the fortress with its massive stone walls. Blocks so large that later Greeks would insist they must have been built by giants. Eurystheus was not a great man. He was not particularly brave or wise or strong. His only real claim to power was his birth, and the fact that Hera had manipulated events to ensure he inherited the throne that might otherwise have gone to Hercules. He was small and frightened and deeply aware of his own inadequacy, especially when standing before his superhuman cousin. The stage was set, hero seeking redemption, a petty king with divine backing, and 12 tasks that would range from difficult to impossible, each one designed not just to test Hercules' strength, but to humiliate him, to break him, to prove once and for all that even the son of Zeus could be made to kneel. The labors would take Hercules across the known world and beyond it. They would force him to face monsters born at the dawn of creation, to descend into the underworld itself, to clean stables and chase birds and wrestle death. Each task carried its own lesson, its own particular cruelty, its own test of what it meant to be not just strong, but heroic. This is not a story about muscles or combat. This is a story about a man trying to become human again, trying to earn back a soul he destroyed in a moment of divine madness. This is about the price of redemption and whether any amount of labor can truly wash away blood from your hands. The labors began in summer. The landscape around Mycenae was dry and golden, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and stones too hot to touch with bare hands. Hercules stood before Eurystheus, waiting for the first task, and the king smiled a small, cruel smile. The first labor seemed almost generous. Kill the Nemean Lion, a simple task for the world's strongest man. Hunt down a beast that had been terrorizing the region of Nemea, slaughtering livestock and people with equal efficiency, and end its reign of terror. Eurystheus delivered the command from behind a barrier, already afraid of his cousin's strength, already planning to hide in a bronze jar buried in the earth if Hercules ever turned violent. The irony was thick. The king who commanded the hero was terrified of him, yet held all the power. Hercules traveled to Nemea, a valley in the northeastern Peloponnese, a place of rocky hills and scattered farms. The people there could tell him exactly where to find the lion. They pointed to the hills, to the cave system in the mountainside, and they described the beast with the precision of trauma. It was massive, they said, larger than any lion anyone had ever seen. Its roar could be heard for miles. But the truly terrifying thing was its hide. Arrows bounced off it. Spears shattered against it. Swords couldn't cut it. Men had tried to kill it. None had succeeded. Most hadn't survived the attempt. Hercules was undeterred. He was the son of Zeus. He had strangled serpents as an infant. He had trained with the greatest heroes of his generation. A lion, no matter how large, was still just an animal. He found the beast's tracks easily enough. Paw prints the size of dinner plates pressed into the dry earth. He followed them into the hills, into the maze of limestone caves that pocked the mountainside like wounds. The heat of the day gave way to the cool darkness of stone. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, the only sound besides his own breathing and the scrape of his sandals on rock. Then the roar. It started as a vibration in his chest before it became sound, a physical force that echoed off the cave walls and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Hercules moved toward it, deeper into the darkness, until he found the lion in a large chamber lit by a shaft of sunlight from a crack in the ceiling above. The beast was everything the villagers had described, and worse. Its mane was dark and thick. Its muscles moved under its hide like coiled rope, and its eyes reflected the light with an intelligence that was almost human. It didn't flee. It didn't cower. It watched Hercules with the calm assessment of a creature that had never lost a fight, that had never had reason to fear anything. Hercules drew his bow, a weapon he had carried since his youth, and fired. The arrow flew straight and true, aimed at the lion's heart. It struck the hide and snapped, the arrowhead shattering against skin that might as well have been bronze. The lion didn't even flinch. Hercules fired again, then again, emptying his quiver with the same result. Arrows littered the cave floor like broken promises. He drew his sword next, the blade that had served him in a dozen battles. He closed the distance between them, the lion watching his approach with something that might have been curiosity. Hercules swung with all his God-born strength, a blow that could have split a shield or severed a tree trunk. The sword struck the lion's shoulder and the blade shattered, pieces of bronze spinning away into the darkness. The lion moved. It was fast in a way that something so large should not be fast. It lunged, claws extended, jaws open wide enough to encompass a man's head. Hercules dodged, barely, feeling the wind of its passage. His weapons were useless. His training, all the techniques learned from human masters, meant nothing here. This was a test of something more fundamental than skill. He did the only thing left. He attacked with his bare hands. When the lion lunged again, Hercules didn't dodge. He stepped into the attack, wrapping his massive arms around the beast's neck, locking his hands together in a grip that had once bent iron bars. The lion thrashed, its claws raking Hercules' back, drawing blood, shredding skin. But Hercules held on. He squeezed. He poured every ounce of his supernatural strength into that grip. Muscles straining, tendons standing out like cables under his skin. The lion's roar became a choke, then a wheeze. Its struggles grew weaker. Hercules squeezed harder, his face pressed against the beast's mane, breathing in the smell of blood and musk and wild places. He squeezed until the thrashing stopped. He squeezed until the body went limp in his arms. He squeezed for several minutes more, just to be certain, before finally releasing his grip and stepping back. The Nemean lion lay dead on the cave floor, killed by the only weapon that could harm it. Hercules himself. But the labor wasn't finished. Eurystheus had demanded proof. Hercules needed to bring back the hide. He tried to skin the beast with his knife, but the blade that couldn't cut the lion in life couldn't cut it in death either. The hide that had turned away every weapon still refused every tool. Hercules sat in the darkness, bleeding from a dozen claw marks, staring at the problem. Then, understanding came. If nothing could cut the hide, then only the hide itself could cut the hide. He used one of the lion's own claws, razor sharp and harder than any metal, to skin the beast. It took hours, careful work in the dim light, but eventually he pulled the pelt free, a perfect trophy, impenetrable armor. He wore it draped over his shoulders, the lion's head serving as a helmet, its jaws framing his face. It would become his signature, the image that would define him across centuries. Hercules in his lion skin, the man who had strangled a monster with his bare hands. He returned to Mycene wearing his trophy, and when Eurystheus saw him approaching, the king fled to his bronze jar and refused to come out until Hercules left. From that day forward, Eurystheus would only communicate with Hercules through a herald, too afraid to face the hero directly. The first labor was complete. 9 more to go. Or so Hercules thought. The number would grow. The second labor sent Hercules to the swamps of Lerna, a place of stagnant water and poisonous air, to kill the Hydra. If the Nemean lion had been a test of strength, the Hydra was a test of strategy. The creature lived in the murky depths of the Lernian marsh, a serpent with multiple heads, the exact number. Varying by account, some saying 7, others 9, still others claiming it grew new heads constantly, so that counting was impossible. But the truly diabolical feature was this: cut off one head and 2 more would grow in its place. It was a monster that became stronger through combat, that turned aggression against itself and multiplied. A perfect trap for a hero who relied on strength. Attack it, and it only became more dangerous. The more you fought, the more you lost. Hercules didn't go alone this time. He brought his nephew Iolaus, a young man eager to prove himself in service to the greatest hero alive. They traveled to Lerna in late summer, when the heat made the swamp stink of rot and decay, when the mosquitoes rose in clouds thick enough to breathe. The Hydra's lair was a spring-fed pool at the center of the marsh. Water so dark it looked like oil, surrounded by twisted trees and reeds that rustled, though there was no wind. Hercules called the monster out by firing flaming arrows into its den. The Hydra emerged slowly, heads rising from the water one by one, serpentine necks weaving, and coiling, fangs dripping with venom so toxic that even its breath was deadly. Its smell alone could kill. The heads struck like whips, faster than thought, and Hercules met them with his club, crushing skulls, shattering vertebrae. But for every head he destroyed, 2 more erupted from the stump, flesh bubbling and splitting. New heads fully formed and already attacking. Within minutes, the monster had doubled its heads, then doubled again. Hercules was losing ground, being overwhelmed by an enemy that fed on his aggression. He called to Ilus. They had prepared for this. Each time Hercules smashed ahead, Ilus would run forward with a torch and cauterize the stump, searing the flesh so completely that nothing could grow back. It was brutal work. Hercules would strike, Ilus would burn, and the smell of charred flesh mixed with the marsh stench until the air was almost unbreathable. Slowly, methodically, they worked through every head, leaving only cauterized stumps behind. The final head was immortal, according to the legends, unable to be killed by any means. Hercules couldn't destroy it, so he did the next best thing. He cut it off and buried it under a massive boulder, trapping it alive in the earth where it would rage forever in darkness. Then he cut open the Hydra's body and dipped his arrows in its blood, creating weapons so poisonous that even a scratch would mean certain death. These arrows would serve him well in labors to come and would eventually cause his own death, decades later when the poison spread from a blood-stained shirt. But that ending was still distant, still invisible on the horizon. Hercules returned to Eurystheus with news of the Hydra's death, but the king refused to count it as a labor. Hercules had help, he said. Iolaus had assisted. The labors were meant to be performed alone. So the second labor was struck from the record, and the count remained at 1. The humiliation was intentional. No matter what Hercules accomplished, it would never be quite enough. The third labor sent him after the Ceryneian hind, a deer sacred to Artemis, goddess of the hunt. It had golden antlers and bronze hooves and could outrun any arrow. Hercules was commanded to capture it alive, an impossible task made worse by the danger of angering Artemis if he harmed her sacred animal. He chased the deer for an entire year, tracking it across mountains and valleys, through forests and rivers, never quite close enough to catch it. It was a test of patience for a man defined by strength, a slow, grinding pursuit that wore him down more effectively than any monster. Finally, he caught it as it paused to drink from a stream and carried it back to Mycenae on his shoulders, being careful not to harm a single hair on its hide. Artemis appeared to him on the road, furious at the capture of her sacred beast. But Hercules explained the situation, the madness, the purification, the servitude. The goddess listened and allowed him to complete the labor, provided he released the deer immediately afterward. He did. The third labor was finished. The count now stood at 2. The fourth labor was the Erymanthian boar, a massive wild pig that terrorized the mountain region of Erymanthos. Hercules was to capture it alive, another test of controlled strength rather than simple violence. He chased the boar into deep snow on the mountain's peak, where it floundered in the drifts while Hercules, larger and stronger, could still move. He netted the beast and brought it back to Mycenae, where the sight of it sent Eurystheus scrambling back into his bronze jar. The labor counted. The total was now 3. The fifth labor was different. It was designed not to test strength, but to humiliate. Eurystheus commanded Hercules to clean the Augean stables in a single day. King Augeas of Elis owned the largest herds of cattle in Greece. Thousands of animals and their stables had not been cleaned in 30 years. The filth had accumulated into mountains of manure. The stench was legendary, and the task was meant to be demeaning. Hercules, the great hero, reduced to shoveling animal waste. But Hercules was smarter than Eurystheus credited. Instead of using a shovel, he diverted to rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, channeling their waters through the stables. The flood washed away 30 years of filth in a matter of hours. The power of nature accomplishing what would have taken 100 men months to achieve. But Eurystheus again refused to count the labor. Hercules had received payment from Augeas, he claimed, and therefore it was paid work, not service. The count remained at 3, though Hercules had now completed 5 tasks. The sixth labor sent him against the Stymphalian birds, meeting creatures with bronze beaks and metallic feathers they could launch like arrows. They infested the marshes around Lake Stymphaleia in Arcadia, darkening the sky in flocks so large they blotted out the sun. Hercules used bronze castanets, given to him by Athena, goddess of wisdom, to startle the birds into flight, then shot them down with his poisoned arrows. Those that escaped fled the region entirely, never to return. The marsh was cleansed. The labor was accepted. The count reached 4. The 7th labor marked a shift in scale and scope. Eurystheus was running out of local monsters and impossible tasks. So he sent Hercules beyond Greece itself, to the island of Crete, to capture the Cretan bull. This was the same bull that had fathered the Minotaur, the monster that lived in the labyrinth beneath King Minos' palace. It was sacred, divine, and completely mad, rampaging across the island with superhuman strength, breathing fire, destroying everything in its path. Hercules sailed to Crete in early autumn, when the Mediterranean was still calm but carried the first hints of winter storms. The island rose from the sea like a mountain, terraced with olive groves and vineyards, the palace at Knossos visible even from a distance, its red columns brilliant against white stone. King Minos welcomed Hercules, or at least didn't oppose him. The bull had become a problem even the great Minoan civilization couldn't solve. If the Greek hero wanted to remove it, Minos wouldn't stand in his way. Hercules found the bull in the interior of the island in a valley where it had been destroying farms and killing livestock. The beast was magnificent and terrible, pure white with eyes like hot coals, vapor rising from its nostrils, muscles moving under its hide with the power of compressed violence. It charged when it saw Hercules' hooves tearing up the earth, head lowered to gore and trample. Hercules didn't dodge. He planted his feet and caught the bull's horns as it struck him, absorbing the impact with his legs, muscles straining against the force. For a moment, man and bull were locked in a contest of raw strength, neither giving ground, the air between them hot with the beast's breath. Then Hercules began to turn the bull's head, slowly, inexorably, twisting the massive neck until the beast was forced to its knees. He tied its legs with rope, hauled it onto his shoulders, and carried it all the way back to the coast, then onto his ship, then across the sea to Mycene. Eurystheus took one look at the mad bull and wanted nothing to do with it. He told Hercules to let it go. The beast was released into the Greek countryside, where it eventually wandered to Marathon and became the famous Marathonian bull that would later be killed by Theseus. But that was another hero story. For Hercules, the labor was done. The count reached 5. The 8th labor took him even farther from home, to Thrace in the north, to the kingdom of Diomedes, a brutal warlord who kept a stable of man-eating mares. These were not natural horses. They had been trained on human flesh, fed a diet of strangers, and shipwrecked sailors until they had developed a taste for it, until they were more like wild beasts than domestic animals. Diomedes was proud of them, saw them as the perfect metaphor for his own savage rule. Hercules arrived with a small group of companions. They stole the mares in the night, but Diomedes discovered the theft and pursued them with an army. In the battle that followed, one of Hercules' companions, a young man named Opterus, was killed and eaten by the mares. Hercules' grief turned to rage. He killed Diomedes personally, then fed the king's body to his own horses, giving them a final taste of human flesh before he tamed them through force of will and strength of arm. He brought the mares back to Mycene, where Eurystheus, in a rare moment of consistency, had them released. They wandered into the wild lands of Mount Olympus, where they were eventually killed by wild animals. The labor counted. The total was 6. The 9th labor sent him to the edge of the known world, to the land of the Amazons, a warrior society of women who lived beyond the Black Sea, to retrieve the belt of Hippolyta, their queen. The belt had been a gift from Ares, god of war, and symbolized her authority over the Amazon nation. Eurystheus wanted it for his daughter, a petty reason for a monumental task. Hercules sailed to the Amazon capital with a crew of heroes, each seeking their own glory. When they arrived, Hippolyta met with Hercules personally. She was impressed by his reputation and his bearing, and in some versions of the story, she fell in love with him. She agreed to give him the belt freely, without combat, without conflict. It should have been the easiest labor yet, but Hera wasn't finished. She disguised herself as an Amazon warrior and spread rumors through the city that Hercules had come to kidnap their queen. The Amazons, fierce and protective, armed themselves and attacked Hercules' ship. In the chaos and violence that followed, Hercules killed Hippolyta, believing she had betrayed him, then took the belt from her body. It was one of the darker moments of his labors, a tragedy born of divine manipulation, another example of how Hera's hatred could turn even victory bitter. He returned to Mycenae with the belt, and Eurystheus accepted the labor. The count reached 7. But the memory of Hippolyta's death lingered. Another name added to the list of people Hercules had killed, another weight on his soul. The 10th labor seemed designed to be impossible. Eurystheus commanded Hercules to steal the cattle of Geryon, a giant who lived on the island of Eretha at the western edge of the world. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, in the region where the sun set and the ocean became unknown. Geryon was a monster with 3 bodies joined at the waist, 3 heads, 6 arms, 6 legs, and the strength of 3 men combined. He was guarded by Orthrus, a 2-headed hound born from the same parents as Cerberus, and by a herdsman named Erytion, who is said to be invincible in combat. Hercules' journey to Eretha took him across the known world and beyond it. He traveled through North Africa, where the heat was so intense that he shot an arrow at the sun in frustration. And the sun god, Helios, amused by his boldness, lent him a golden cup that could sail across the ocean. Hercules used this cup to cross from Africa to Eretha, a voyage of days across waters no Greek had ever mapped. When he reached the island, he was confronted first by Orthrus, the 2-headed dog. Hercules killed it with a single blow from his club. Erytion the herdsman came next, and despite his reputation for invincibility, he fell just as quickly. Then Geryon himself appeared, 3 bodies moving in perfect coordination, 6 arms wielding weapons, 3 voices roaring challenge. The fight should have been impossible. 3 warriors moving as one, attacking from multiple angles, each body protecting the others. But Hercules used his poisoned arrows, the ones he had created from the Hydra's blood. A single arrow could kill with even the smallest scratch, and Hercules was the finest archer of his generation. He shot Geryon through all 3 bodies with a single arrow, the shaft passing through one chest and into the next, spreading poison through all 3 hearts simultaneously. The giant fell, his 3 bodies collapsing into a single heap. Hercules herded the cattle back to Greece, a journey that took him through Gaul and Italy and across the Apennine Mountains. The cattle escaped and wandered several times, and he had to recapture them repeatedly, fighting local kings and monsters along the way. The journey took months, possibly years, but eventually he delivered the herd to Mycenae. Eurystheus sacrificed them to Hera, a final insult. The fruits of Hercules' labor offered to the goddess who hated him most. The labor was accepted. The count should have reached 8, but Eurystheus had invalidated the Hydra and the Augean stables, so the official total was only 8. 2 more to go. The 11th labor sent Hercules to a place that existed more in myth than geography, the Garden of the Hesperides, where golden apples grew on a tree that had been a wedding gift from Gaia, the earth itself, to Hera. The tree was guarded by the Hesperides nymphs, who were daughters of the night, and by Ladon, a 100-headed dragon that never slept, whose coils wrapped around the tree trunk and whose many heads watched from every angle. The location of the garden was not fixed on any map. Some said it was in the far west, beyond where the sun sets. Others claimed it was in the lands of the Hyperboreans, in the frozen north. Still others insisted it was in Africa or on a hidden island in the ocean. Hercules wandered for years searching for it, the longest of all his labors, a quest that took him to every corner of the known world and several places beyond it. During his search, he encountered Antaeus, a giant who was invincible as long as he maintained contact with the earth. Every time Antaeus was knocked down, he rose stronger, drawing power from his mother Gaia through the ground itself. Hercules realized the trick and lifted Antaeus into the air, holding him aloft until the giant weakened, then crushed him in a bear hug while his feet dangled helpless above the earth. He met Prometheus, the Titan who had given fire to humanity and was being punished by Zeus for the transgression. Prometheus was chained to a mountain in the Caucasus, where every day an eagle would eat his liver, and every night it would grow back, an eternal cycle of agony. Hercules killed the eagle with one of his arrows, freeing Prometheus from his torment, and in gratitude, the Titan told him how to reach the Garden of the Hesperides. The secret was not to go himself, but to send someone else. Prometheus advised Hercules to find Atlas, the Titan who held up the sky, and convince him to retrieve the apples. Hercules found Atlas at the western edge of the world, legs braced, shoulders bent under the weight of the heavens. Muscles that had not rested since the war between the Titans and the gods. Hercules made an offer. He would hold the sky if Atlas would retrieve the golden apples from the garden. The apples were in a place Atlas could reach, guarded by his own daughters, the Hesperides. It was a simple task. Atlas agreed. The moment Atlas transferred the weight of the sky to Hercules' shoulders, the hero understood true burden. This wasn't the weight of stone or metal, something physical that could be endured through strength. This was the weight of everything, the entire cosmos pressing down, infinite and eternal. His knees buckled, his back bent. Every muscle in his body screamed, but he held. He had to. If he let go, the sky would fall and the world would end. Atlas returned with the apples after what might have been hours or might have been days. Time moved strangely under that weight. But the Titan had no intention of taking the sky back. He had been freed from his burden after an eternity of suffering. He told Hercules he would deliver the apples to Eurystheus himself. Hercules could keep holding the sky forever. Hercules used cunning, the gift of Athena, rather than Zeus. He agreed to Atlas's plan, but asked the Titan to take the sky back for just a moment so Hercules could adjust his cloak. To pat his shoulders for better comfort during the eternal burden. Atlas, not the cleverest of beings, agreed. The moment the weight was transferred back, Hercules grabbed the apples and ran, leaving Atlas to resume his eternal punishment. Hercules brought the golden apples to Eurystheus, but the king was afraid to keep them. They were sacred to Hera, and keeping them might invoke her wrath even against him. Athena took the apples and returned them to the garden, completing a circle. All that effort for nothing tangible. But the labor counted. The total reached 9 by Eurystheus' count, 11 by reality. The 12th and final labor was the one that should have been impossible. Eurystheus commanded Hercules to descend into the underworld and bring back Cerberus, the three-headed hound that guarded the gates of Hades, the monster that prevented the dead from escaping and the living from entering. To complete this task, Hercules would have to enter the realm of death itself while still alive. Confront Hades, god of the dead, and somehow convince him to loan out the guardian of the entire underworld. Hercules prepared for the descent through ritual purification. He was initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, ancient rites that taught the secrets of death and rebirth. That prepared initiates for the journey all souls must eventually take. Then he traveled to Tanarome in the southern Peloponnese, where a cave descended deep into the earth, where the boundary between the living world and the dead grew thin. The descent was gradual, a slow journey through darkness that deepened with each step. The air grew cold, then colder still, a chill that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the absence of life. Light faded until Hercules was walking blind, one hand on the wall, feeling his way down passages carved by no human hand. The cave became a tunnel. The tunnel became a passageway between worlds. He emerged on the banks of the Styx, the river that separated the living from the dead. Its waters black and slow-moving, carrying something heavier than water. Charon the ferryman was waiting, ancient and skeletal, his boat designed to carry souls, not living flesh. But Hercules' presence was so powerful, so alive, that Charon agreed to ferry him across, the boat riding lower in the water than it ever had before. The underworld was not the place of torment and flame that later religions would imagine. It was gray and dim, a place of shadows and memory, where the dead drifted like smoke, insubstantial and fading. Hercules walked among them, the only solid thing in a realm of ghosts, and they parted before him like mist. He encountered the Gorgon Medusa, or her shade, the ghost of the monster Perseus had killed. He drew his sword before realizing she was only a phantom, harmless in death. He met Theseus and Pirithous, two heroes who had attempted to kidnap Persephone, Hades' wife, and had been trapped in chairs that bonded to their flesh, holding them prisoner. Hercules freed Theseus, pulling him from the chair, though it tore away skin and muscle. But when he tried to free Pirithous, the earth shook in warning, and he stopped. Pirithous had been the ringleader of the kidnapping plot. His punishment was eternal. Finally, Hercules reached the throne of Hades, where the god of the dead sat with Persephone beside him, ruling over the infinite kingdom of the deceased. Hercules made his petition. He needed to borrow Cerberus to bring the hound to the surface world and show it to Eurystheus, then return it unharmed. It was an outrageous request, impossible to grant, except that Hades had a sense of respect for proper supplication and adherence to rules. Hercules had entered the underworld through the proper gateway, had been purified through the proper rituals, and had shown respect to the dead. Hades made an offer. Hercules could take Cerberus, but only if he could subdue the beast without weapons. No club, no arrows, no sword. Only his strength and his will against the guardian of the dead. Cerberus was waiting at the gates, 3 heads, each the size of a lion's. Teeth like daggers, eyes that burned with something that might have been fire or might have been the reflection of countless souls. A serpent's tail lashed behind it, venomous and quick. The hound's body was massive, muscled like a bull, built to overpower anything that tried to pass. Hercules approached empty-handed, and Cerberus attacked immediately, all 3 heads striking at once, jaws snapping for his throat, his arms, his legs. Hercules locked his arms around the beast's central neck. It's the same technique he had used against the Nemean Lion, and squeezed. The other 2 heads bit into his shoulders, tearing flesh, and the serpent tail wrapped around his leg, fangs sinking into his calf. He held on. Blood ran down his arms and back, his own and the hound's mixed together. His vision narrowed. His muscles burned. But slowly, gradually, Cerberus's struggles weakened. The heads stopped biting. The tail unwound. The massive body went limp in his arms, not dead, but subdued. The fight gone out of it. Hercules carried Cerberus through the underworld, back to the Styx, where Charon refused to ferry the hound across, and Hercules had to wade through the river itself, the water trying to pull him down, to claim him as one of the dead. He climbed the passages back to the surface, carrying the weight of the 3-headed hound, and emerged into sunlight that seemed impossibly bright after the gray dimness below. He brought Cerberus to Mycenae, and when Eurystheus saw the monster from the underworld standing before his palace, the king fled to his bronze jar and screamed for Hercules to take it back. The labor was complete. Just take it away. Hercules, gentle with the beast now, carried Cerberus back down into the earth, back through the passages, back across the Styx, and returned it to its post at the gates of the dead. Hades accepted the hound's return and acknowledged that Hercules had fulfilled his bargain. The 12th labor was finished. The count was complete. Hercules had served his time, performed tasks that ranged from the merely impossible to the absolutely insane, and survived them all. His purification was complete, at least in the eyes of the gods and men. Whether he had truly purified himself, whether he had earned redemption for the murder of his family, was a question without a clean answer. Hercules emerged from the labors changed. He was still the strongest man alive, still the son of Zeus. But the experience had taught him things that raw power never could. He had learned cunning from dealing with the Hydra and tricking Atlas. He had learned humility from shoveling stables and chasing deer. He had learned that some problems couldn't be solved through violence, that sometimes the solution required patience or intelligence or the willingness to ask for help. But redemption is not a clean state that can be achieved through labor. The blood on his hands was still there, invisible but permanent. The deaths of Megara and his children could not be undone by killing monsters or cleaning stables. The labors had purified him in the eyes of society and satisfied the demands of divine justice, but they couldn't erase memory. They couldn't bring back the dead. Hercules would go on to have many more adventures after the labors ended. He would join the Argonauts in their quest for the Golden Fleece, though he would leave the expedition early after his companion Hylas was kidnapped by nymphs. He would fight in wars, rescue cities, kill more monsters, save more people. He would marry again, multiple times, and have more children. He would make the same mistakes of violence and rage that had defined his life before the labors, proving that redemption is not a permanent state, but something that must be constantly maintained. His death, when it finally came, was caused by the very weapons he had created during the labors. His second wife, Deianira, had been given what she thought was a love potion by a centaur Hercules had killed. It was actually the blood of that centaur who had been poisoned by one of Hercules' hydrovenom arrows. When Deianira feared she was losing her husband's love, she smeared the potion on a ceremonial shirt and gave it to him. The moment he put it on, the Hydra's poison activated, burning his skin, melting his flesh. The pain was unbearable, beyond anything even Hercules could endure. He built his own funeral pyre on Mount Ota and climbed onto it, asking someone to light the flames. Finally, a passing hero named Philoctetes agreed, and Hercules was consumed by fire. But he didn't die, not completely. Zeus intervened at the last moment, bringing his son to Olympus and granting him immortality. Hercules became a god, married Hebe, the goddess of youth, and was finally reconciled with Hera, ending the hatred that had defined his entire life. But that ending feels like myth imposing itself on truth, like the need for stories to have closure overriding the messy reality of existence. The truth of Hercules is in the labors themselves, in the image of a man trying to work his way back to humanity through impossible tasks, in the question of whether any amount of effort can truly erase the past. The ancient Greeks told these stories not because they believed in perfect heroes, but because they understood that being heroic was difficult and complicated and often contradictory. Hercules was strong enough to strangle monsters, but not strong enough to control his own mind when madness struck. He was clever enough to divert rivers, but not clever enough to see through Hera's manipulations. He was brave enough to descend into the underworld, but cowardly enough to sometimes flee from his own emotions. Both. The labors themselves are a catalog of different types of impossibility. Some required brute force, like strangling the lion or capturing the bull. Some required intelligence, like cleaning the stables or escaping Atlas's trap. Some required endurance, like chasing the hind for a year. Some required confronting death itself, like descending to face Cerberus. Together, they created a complete test, not just of physical ability, but of character, of the capacity to adapt and persist and survive no matter what the world threw at you. The geography of the labors is worth noting. They took Hercules across the entire known world and beyond it. From Nemea in Greece to the Garden of the Hesperides at the edge of reality. From the marshes of Lerna to the underworld beneath all places. The labors were a journey not just through space, but through the full range of human experience. Each location carried its own atmosphere, its own particular danger. The dry heat of Nemea, where the lion hunted. The stinking swamps of Lerna, where the Hydra lurked. The cold depths below the earth, where Cerberus kept watch. These weren't just backdrops. They were essential elements of each trial, environments that had to be understood and navigated. The people Hercules encountered during his labors are telling as well. Eurystheus, the coward who commanded from safety, Iolaus, the loyal nephew. Hippolyta, the Amazon queen whose initial kindness was destroyed by divine interference. Atlas, the titan who sought escape from his burden. Hades, the god who respected proper protocols even in the face of an impossible request. Each one taught Hercules something, whether he realized it at the time or not. That authority doesn't equal courage. That accepting help isn't weakness. That kindness can be destroyed by forces beyond anyone's control. That everyone is trying to escape their own burden. That following the rules matters, even when the rules seem arbitrary. The monsters themselves are deeply symbolic. The Nemean Lion represents problems that cannot be solved through conventional means. Threats that turn away every normal weapon and require innovation. The Hydra represents problems that multiply when attacked directly, that require strategy rather than aggression. The Stymphalian birds represent swarms, overwhelming numbers that must be dispersed rather than fought. Cerberus represents the ultimate boundary, the line between life and death that all must eventually cross, but none can cross early without consequence. And running through all of it, the constant presence of Hera, the goddess whose hatred initiated the entire cycle. Her rage at Zeus's infidelity was understandable in human terms, but her method of revenge, destroying not Zeus, but his innocent children and their mother, reveals something about how divine anger operates in Greek mythology. The gods are petty and cruel, and often punish the wrong people. They interfere constantly in mortal affairs, usually making things worse. They demand worship and sacrifice, but offer little in return, except the absence of active persecution. Hercules' greatest strength was that he kept going, no matter how impossible the task. No matter how many times Eurystheus moved the goalposts or invalidated his labors, no matter how much Hera interfered, he continued. He didn't give up. It didn't collapse under the weight of guilt or the burden of impossible demands. He found a way through each challenge, sometimes through strength, sometimes through intelligence, sometimes through sheer stubborn persistence. This is the real lesson of the labors. Not that being strong makes you a hero. Not that violence solves problems. Not that the gods will reward virtue. The lesson is simpler and harder. That redemption is labor. That recovering from mistakes, especially catastrophic ones, requires work that seems impossible. That the weight you carry doesn't get lighter. You just get stronger at carrying it. That justice, whether divine or human, often makes no sense and cannot be argued with, only endured. The image of Hercules that survives in popular culture is usually the strongman, the muscle-bound hero who wins through sheer physical power. But the Hercules of the actual myths is more complicated. He cries, he makes mistakes, he gets tricked. He accepts help when he needs it. He uses intelligence as often as strength. He's not invincible or infallible. Someone trying to be better than his worst moment, trying to work his way back from the unforgivable. The Greeks understood that heroes were not perfect people. They were people who kept trying to be heroic even after they had failed catastrophically. Hercules killed his family in madness. Odysseus made mistakes that got his entire crew killed. Theseus abandoned Ariadne after she saved him. Jason betrayed Medea after she had sacrificed everything for him. Greek heroes were defined not by their virtue, but by their persistence, their refusal to quit even when they probably should have. The 12 labors stand as a monument to that idea. 12 impossible tasks completed over years or decades, each one a separate test of a different aspect of heroism. Strength, cunning, endurance, humility, courage, wisdom, respect for the divine, willingness to descend into darkness, ability to resist temptation, capacity for innovation, perseverance in the face of futility, and finally the ability to return what was borrowed and close the circle. The labors of Hercules have echoed through history in ways the original myth-tellers couldn't have imagined. The 12 tasks became a template for heroic journeys, a structure that writers and storytellers would return to again and again across centuries and cultures. The idea that redemption requires labor, that purification comes through completing impossible tasks. That strength alone is never enough. These concepts spread far beyond ancient Greece. The Roman version of Hercules, which they called Heracles before Latinizing it to Hercules, softened some of the darker elements of the Greek original. The Romans preferred their heroes more straightforwardly virtuous, less complicated by madness and murder. They emphasized Hercules' civilizing influence, how his labors often involved removing monsters that threatened human communities, making the world safer for civilization. They built temples to him throughout their empire, making him a protector god, a patron of strength and endurance. But the Greek version, with all its complications and contradictions, is the one that carries more truth. Because real heroism is complicated. Real redemption is never clean. Real strength includes the capacity to be broken and to rebuild yourself afterward. The labors also became a metaphor for any series of difficult tasks that must be completed to achieve a goal. We still say someone is facing a Herculean task when they confront something nearly impossible. We reference the Augean stables when talking about cleaning up massive corruption or accumulated filth. We invoke Hercules when we need an image of someone who persists despite overwhelming odds. Each individual labor has its own afterlife in culture and language. The Nemean lion's hide became the most recognizable attribute of Hercules in art, depicted in thousands of sculptures and paintings across thousands of years. The Hydra became the go-to metaphor for problems that multiply when attacked, used in contexts from politics to pest control to computer viruses. The journey to the Underworld to capture Cerberus influenced countless later stories about descents into hell or death realms, from Dante's Inferno to modern video games. But beyond the individual elements, the labors as a whole represent something fundamental about the human experience. They represent the idea that we can work our way back from our worst moments. That mistakes, even catastrophic ones, don't have to define us forever. That labor, in the sense of work and effort and persistence, has a kind of redemptive power. Hercules didn't earn redemption through a single grand gesture or through divine forgiveness granted from above. He earned it through a decade or more of grueling, often humiliating work. He cleaned stables. He chased deer. He did tasks that seemed designed more to humble him than to test him. And through it all, he persisted. The psychological truth of this resonates across time. Recovery from trauma or guilt or catastrophic failure doesn't happen through a single breakthrough moment. It happens through daily labor, through getting up and continuing even when it seems pointless, through completing tasks that feel impossible until suddenly they're done and the next impossible task appears. Hercules, in his madness, killed the people he loved most. Hercules in his labors learned to live with that, to build something from the ruins, to become a person who could be trusted again despite having been untrustworthy in the worst possible way. The labors didn't erase what he had done. They proved he could be something other than that worst moment. This is why the story survives. Not because it's about a strong man killing monsters, though that's part of it, but because it's about a broken person putting themselves back together through work, through persistence, through refusing to let their worst moment be their final moment. The final labor was never really final. Hercules would continue to face trials and challenges throughout his life. The labors gave him purification in the eyes of society and the gods, but they didn't give him peace. He would make more mistakes, cause more harm, try to redeem himself again and again. The pattern established by the labors became the pattern of his life. Fall, rise, labor, continue. When we think about Hercules today, we should remember that the labors were not about becoming perfect. They were about proving that even after the worst possible failure, continuation is possible. even after killing the people you love, even after losing everything, even after being reduced to servitude and forced to complete humiliating tasks, you can keep going. You can build something from the ruins. You can become someone whose name means more than your worst moment. The Greeks built temples to Hercules, not because he was flawless, but because he was flawed and kept trying anyway. They told his stories not to celebrate strength, but to explore what it means to be strong when everything has been lost. They preserved the darkest parts of his myth, alongside the triumphant moments, because they understood that heroes are not people who never fall. Heroes are people who fall catastrophically and then find a way to rise. The 12 labors remain what they have always been, a map for impossible journeys, a proof that impossible journeys can be completed, and a reminder that redemption is not a destination, but a direction. You move toward it through labor. You approach it through persistence. You never quite reach it, but the movement itself matters. Hercules never forgot what he had done. The blood of his wife and children stained his hands forever. Invisible but permanent, a guilt that no amount of monster slaying could wash away. But he learned to carry it, to let it be part of him without being all of him, to build a life that acknowledged the worst thing he had ever done, while also containing so much more. That, in the end, is what the labors teach. Not that hard work erases the past, but that hard work allows you to build something alongside the past. Something that can bear the weight of what came before while also reaching toward what might come after. The labors are finished. The work continues. The story endures.